Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida rise?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that when the House adjourns today, it adjourn to meet at noon tomorrow, and further, when the House adjourns on that day, it adjourn to meet at 1 p.m. on Sunday, the 31st of July, 2011.
Without objection, so ordered. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 5, 2011, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. West, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Free markets, free enterprise, innovation, and entrepreneurship are the foundation for economic growth and job creation in America. For the past 4 years, Democrats in Washington have enacted policies that undermine these basic concepts, which have historically placed America at the forefront of the global marketplace. As a result, most Americans know someone who has recently lost a job, and small businesses and entrepreneurs lack the confidence needed to invest in our economy. Not since the Great Depression has our nation's unemployment rate been this high for this long. Enough is enough. More taxation, regulation, and litigation will not create more jobs. Government takeovers of the economy have failed while the size and scope of the federal government has exploded. Washington has tied the hands of small business owners and job creators with onerous regulations and backward fiscal policies that have stalled the economy, slowed innovation, and destroyed jobs. We need common sense growth policies to give small businesses and entrepreneurs renewed confidence in our economy and to remove Washington as the roadblock to job creation. America is at a crossroads, and House Republicans are committed to taking every possible step to spur private sector job creation and get our economy back on track so that Americans can do what they do best: create, innovate, and lead. Tonight, my colleague and I will convey the frustrations of small business owners and those who have received the bad end of the stick of horrible policies created by the Obama administration. At this time, I yield to the gentleman from Arizona, my friend and colleague, Mr. Schweikert.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. West, thank you. I appreciate it. Hey, one of my reasons for asking you for a little bit of your time this evening, as the boards go running away, see if we can actually get all four there, is one of these days I'm supposed to come here to the floor, and we're putting together an actual presentation of the Medicare Actuary Report to walk people through, both our citizens and our fellow members here, the reality of the numbers. But there's so much rhetoric on the floor today, and even within the last couple hours, that it became one of those, it was time to come back here to the floor. These are some slides that we used about a week ago. And it was my great frustration because how do you manage a government? How do you engage in this political process when we're operating under mathematical folklore? You know, we're living in a fantasy land when you see members walk up to that microphone, look the public in the eye through that camera and say, if we would just get rid of those incentives to buy corporate jets, if we would just tax big oil, it's those millionaires and billionaires. So one more time, we're going to actually walk through a little bit of mathematical reality so we might be able to start having an argument, a debate, a discussion that has some basis in fact instead of basis in, I'm going to say whatever's necessary from this microphone to get reelected. And it breaks my heart, but in my 7 months here, I think that happens an awful darn lot. So first off, okay, let's actually a quick sample of where we're at today. That's a dollar bill. Do you see this first part? That's 42%. So 42 pennies of every dollar this federal government is spending today is borrowed. That's why this debate that we're going through right now is so much more than just the debt ceiling and how much more our borrowing capacity is. It is the fact we're buried in debt and we are crashing, being crushed under that weight. If you go and read the S&P letters and the Moody's letters, it's so much more than raise the debt ceiling or you might get downgraded. It's you are going to get downgraded unless there is a credible plan to demonstrate how you intend to bend this debt curve. That's the real debate around here. That's what you were seeing the Republicans passionately try to discuss with the American people and with our brothers and sisters from the other side, that this was so much more than raising the debt ceiling. It was a discussion about saving this republic. So, if you have a republic, this government borrows 42 pennies out of every dollar we spend. How long do you think that's going to last? So what sort of rhetorical things do we get to hear around here? Well, let's actually do a little analysis on a couple of them. How many of you in the last 24 hours, both either in the gallery or here, on the floor with me, or my good friend Mr. West, have heard members walk up to microphones, shake their hands and say, "No more subsidies for those corporate jets"? Okay, maybe they're right. But let's actually do the math. We borrow about $4.7 billion every single day. And that whole piece of rhetoric, which I know has been tested through polling and focus groups, so it is all about politics and campaigning and not the truth to the American people, is 15 seconds of that borrowing every day. So one more time. We borrow $4.7 billion every single day, and the rhetoric you hear about those depreciation on the corporate jets, we need to take that way. Even if it were something sensible and we need to, it's 15 seconds a day. Okay, so you nod your head and say, all right, if we got rid of it, great, but it's 15 seconds a day. So let's go on to the next bit of rhetoric we were hearing today. Big oil. We need to take away those subsidies, those incentives to go out and find more oil. Well, let's do this. What if the math were, we're going to take away those subsidies from all oil, all fossil fuels, not just big oil? Well, we borrow $4.7 billion a day. It's $2.44 billion a year. Well, that equates to a good 2.2 minutes of borrowing a day. So let's see. So far, the two prime bits of rhetoric we heard here today equal 15 seconds, 2.2 minutes of borrowing. And this is the type of solutions we keep getting from the left. And the reason we're getting those types of solutions, it's because it's tested through polling. It's easy for the public to understand, even though it's horribly untruthful to the public that's actually trying to get their heads around the scale of this problem. So let's actually go on to one of the other ones we heard today. How about those millionaires and those billionaires? Those Bush tax extensions. All right. But let's first be honest. They're the Bush tax extensions. They're actually the Bush-Obama tax extensions. Because remember, President Obama did sign the extension in December. If you were to take away those tax extensions for every American, not just those millionaires and billionaires, what does it buy you? Okay, remember, once again, we're borrowing $4.7 billion a day. It would buy you a good 28 minutes of borrowing. So this rhetoric we hear from the president and around here, I know it may politically be wonderful and it's politically easy to digest, but mathematically, it just isn't the truth. And it doesn't lead you to a solution. Because think of this one more time. The depreciation on jets. The fossil fuels. The incentives to find fossil fuels. Ending the Bush tax cut extensions, the Bush-Obama tax cut extensions, and assuming, which we did in our math, that every single dime came in, that you didn't slow the economy down, you didn't raise unemployment. We used a magical fantasy number that every dime came back in and was applied straight to the deficit and to the debt. All three of the rhetorical points we heard over and over and over today add up to a half an hour of borrowing. I turn to my brothers and sisters on the left one more time, and this is starting to become a habit here. What would you like to do with the other 23 and a half hours? Mr. West, I yield my time back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Schweikert.
Chair reminds members not to refer to occupants of the gallery during their comments.
Mr. Speaker, we must empower small business owners. and reduce regulatory burdens. Job creators are being bogged down by burdensome regulation from Washington that prevent job creation and hinder economic growth. These regulations are particularly damaging for the real job creators in the country, our small business owners. We must remove onerous federal regulations that are redundant, harmful to small businesses, and impede private sector investment in job creation. The Small Business Administration has reported that government regulations are estimated to cost our economy over $1.75 trillion a year. To make matters worse, in 2009, the administration considered adding another 184 regulations that are estimated to cost the economy in excess of $100 million each, and likely to cause more Americans to lose jobs. At this time, I'd like to yield to my friend and colleague from Colorado, Mr. Tipton.
Thank you, Congressman West. You know, tonight we're talking about small business in America, the #1 job creator in America. I'm a small businessman. I'm not a career politician. It seems to me that once you come to this place and you're surrounded by pillars of marble, vast expanses of grass and glorious monuments, that it seems to kind of cloud your vision on what's really going on back at home. We are seeing businesses right now. They aren't the mega corporations that are often talked about by our colleagues. Small businesses trying to provide a job, trying to be able to build a future. I live in western Colorado. My district encompasses a good portion of the entire state of Colorado, the 8th largest congressional district in the United States. 54,000 square miles. The #1 employer there, a small business. Traveling through that district, I found it remarkable. As I have stopped in those small businesses, visited with the owners, sole proprietorships, sub-S corporations, LLCs, people just trying to make a living. As I visited in those communities with county commissioners, with city council members, one message comes through loud and clear. Government is over-regulating America. It is hurting our ability to truly be able to get Americans back to work. Congressman West just mentioned a very important figure. In this country, we are paying $1,750 billion a year. In terms of regulatory cost, that is impeding America's ability to be able to get back to work. Now, some of our friends always want to take that to the extreme, saying that we want to eliminate all regulations. It's not the case. You know, when we go back to the beginning of the 20th century, when we were starting to build cars in this country, in New York City, there were 2 automobiles, 2 cars. They ran into each other. So stoplights are not a bad idea. But government has overreached. It is hurting small business and our opportunity to truly be able to grow America. Let me tell you a story about a constituent of mine. Started out with nothing. He and his wife invested and scraped together dollars, and they worked hard, and over the course of the years they've been able to build a small car dealership in western Colorado. He called me up the last few days and he said, Washington simply doesn't get it. They seem to believe that they need money more than we do here at home. And that brings us back to a lot of the conversation which we've been having over these last few days in terms of the debt and the deficit in this country. We currently have a debt in this nation, $14.3 trillion. Come the end of September, we're going to be adding on another $1.4 trillion on top of that national debt. A crushing burden on the promise of America. His granddaughter, she isn't old enough really to know how much she owes. but her portion of that national debt is now well in excess of $45,000. If our children, if our grandchildren are going to inherit the promise of America, we have to restrain, we have to slow down, we have to reduce the spending in Washington, D.C. We simply can't afford it. The numbers are too high. Our colleagues will tell us that taxes are the answer. They like to call it a balanced approach. We need more of your money because Washington needs it more. They fail to point out that through the bills that they have passed through this chamber, Congressman West and I, we weren't here. We didn't help create the problem, but we are certainly here to try and help solve the problem. They increased the debt on the backs of the American people when they passed Obamacare, government-run health care. I'm concerned about that because it is hurting jobs in America. That small businessman who started that business from nothing and was able to grow that car dealership is afraid to hire because he doesn't know what the costs are going to be from government-run health care. Well, we've got a pretty good idea, at least the upfront costs. It's costing us better than $1 trillion. Our senior citizens, indeed, are worried about that. Through the actions of our counterparts, we saw that $562 billion was cut out of Medicare to be able to fund that program. And starting in January of this coming year, the President will appoint his 15-member commission to start rationing health care for senior citizens. We're fighting to stop that. The connectivity which we see in our economy between government regulations, excessive taxation, and having too many people in Washington who've never got dirt under their fingernails. They've never met a payroll. They've never created a job. They've never worked in the private sector. That's the disconnect between here and at home. We have people right now that are gathering around their kitchen tables. They're looking at the resources that they have coming in and knowing that they can't spend more than they take in. Tomorrow morning, those small businesses are going to unlock the doors. They know that they have to spend within the limitations of the income that they have. 49 of our states live under a balanced budget requirement, just like the men and women who live in the communities of those states. Isn't it about time? Isn't it about time that Washington applied the same principles that they expect out of every American family to apply to Washington, D.C.? Some will say no, but that's a challenge. More importantly, that is the opportunity that we truly face right now in this country. We have an opportunity to change the course of American history for the better. To embrace once again the values that truly made this country the freest, the richest, and the greatest nation on the face of the earth, and that the earth will truly ever see. American entrepreneurship, American know-how. But we have to have the freedom, the resources, the opportunity to do that. Government has not become no longer the stepping stone to success in this country, but it has indeed become the stumbling block. This is our chance. This is our opportunity. We have many votes here, had a vote today. This is not the end of the debate, but it is the beginning of a solution. If we embrace that opportunity, that special and unique thing that it is to truly be an American, American exceptionalism, and allow Americans to do what they do best, to innovate, to create, and to build, we will be able to get this country back on the right course. But it will not come as long as we continue to build government, protect programs, and forget about the people who sent us to Washington. Let's stand up once again for the American people, for the small business people who truly make America work, and the #1 job creators in our country. I yield back.
Thanks to my colleague, Mr. Tipton from Colorado. Mr. Speaker, we know that not all regulations are bad, but so many of them are obstacles to job creation. A recent study by the Heritage Foundation found that an unprecedented 43 major regulations were imposed in fiscal year 2010, with a total economic cost of $26.5 billion, the highest total since at least 1981. The cost of regulations is a big obstacle for American job creators. But when you think about regulations, here are just an example of some of the ones that can make you laugh. The Department of Energy requires microwave makers to measure the amount of energy their products use in the off position. The Environmental Protection Agency wants stricter regulations on the amount of dust on American farms. The Department of Interior wants to impose a fee on Christmas tree sales to promote Christmas tree sales. When you think about how government regulations destroy American jobs, these are the statistics that will make you cry. According to a Louisiana State University professor, the Department of Interior's de facto moratorium of exploration in the Gulf of Mexico could cost 36,137 jobs. In addition, more than 80,000 jobs could be lost due to the EPA regulations targeting the cement industry. And finally, EPA greenhouse gas regulations could cost 1.4 million jobs. The American people placed an upper limit on the damage that Washington Democrats could inflict on the economy by firing House Democrats in the last election. In January, we began to implement the Pledge to America, which is focused on providing an environment for economic growth and job creation. We voted to repeal the government takeover of health care, roll back costly Obama administration regulations, cut job-destroying spending, and change the culture of Washington, D.C. from one which talks about how much more they can spend to one which now talks about how much we can cut in spending. The United States Congress in 2009 passed the President's almost $800 billion stimulus package, which we now have convincing proof that it did nothing to reduce unemployment. Today, the House of Representatives has sent 9 real-life job-creating bills to the U.S. Senate, yet those bills continue to sit, waiting to be voted on, similar to the cut, cap, and balance that we sent over, that the Senate Majority Leader tabled. I have introduced my own piece of legislation to do my part to try to reduce unemployment, the Small Business Encouragement Act, H.R. 1663. The President continues with an economic policy based on job-killing overregulation, the specter of increased taxes, and the implementation of Obamacare. How many more months are we going to see this stagnant job growth? We are now at 29 months of unemployment in the United States of America, being at or above 9%. The President has to realize his policies have failed. They have failed the American people, and it is time to go in a different direction. The solution lies in economic, taxation, and regulatory policies which incentivize long-term private sector growth. We must restore confidence, provide access to capital, and create economic certainty. Now is not the time for more rhetoric on spending, borrowing, and raising taxes. Our country is in a crisis, and time is running out. We must remember that it is those same ma and pop stores on Main Street, back in our respective districts, that create the jobs for our teenagers during these summer months. It is the local hair salon back home that my wife and my 2 daughters visit often that will be affected by the uncertainty that persists throughout this nation. economic uncertainty created by our massive federal debt, burdensome regulatory environment on small businesses, and uncertain tax policy for 2012 is slowing commerce, and we must turn the corner. Today's somber GDP announcement in the last quarter of 1.3% growth, and the previous quarter 0.5% growth, is further proof that President Obama's administration's economic strategy is not working. Unemployment still remains above 9%, at 9.2% nationally. In the inner city, in our black communities, it's at 16.2%. And unfortunately, for our veterans, of which I am one, that unemployment rate is 13%. And we just talked about our quarterly GDP growth. That is unacceptable for the most powerful economy in the world. Providing certainty for America's small businesses should be the #1 priority for Washington, considering they are the backbone of our nation's workforce and the engine of our economy. In May, House Republicans put forth a plan for America's job creators. That includes common sense policies to remove uncertainty by reducing regulatory burdens, lowering business tax rates to 25%, spurring exports by quickly passing the pending free trade agreements, and introducing a budget that gets our nation's fiscal house in order. The sooner we enact policies like these into law, the sooner our small businesses will be able to lead us out of this economic downturn. And Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields.